Welcome back to the Renaissance Space podcast, where we have the opportunity to listen and better understand life in education. I'm delighted to reconnect with Nick Hart, who is the principal of the Horizon English School in Dubai. I first spoke to Nick several years ago when he was a head teacher in Slough. Nick has a strong belief in empowering colleagues, but he also recognises the importance of collaboration, innovation, and creativity. So, welcome, Nick. I can't remember the last time we spoke, but it was a while ago, and you were in Slough, where you're definitely not now.
Yeah, it's sunny Dubai now, and yeah, it has been a number of years, Margaret. Yes, but yeah, the weather right now and the background is somewhat different from Slough. Better, but still miss it.
Still miss it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Home is home, isn't it? I suppose wherever you are, you sort of look back. And we're coming to the end of the first term of the school year. Just as a sort of potted history, if you like, who are you and why are you in Dubai? And, what are you doing?
Yeah, so my job at the moment is principal of a rather large primary school in Dubai, Horizon English School, part of the Cognita group of schools worldwide. So Cognita has over 100 schools all across the world, UK, Europe, Middle East, South America, and the Middle East is one of the fastest growing regions for Cognita schools. So when I joined Horizon English School a year ago, there was just a small handful of schools in the Middle East, and now we're, I think, up to 10 and growing in the Middle Eastern countries. And so it's a really exciting group to be part of, a really great team of people who think really hard about education, and it's a move that really grateful for, having come from the UK as an executive head teacher and now in Dubai as a principal.
Wow, what an exciting time. And I can see why you were tempted and why we lost you from the UK, but I'm sure you'll come back one day. Who knows? So I'm going to pick on 3 words that you've written a lot. Alignment, improvement, transition are 3 words that are captured in one of your blogs. Would you like to just talk about how they feature in your world?
It came about from preparing to move to Dubai, and this school. This school is a very high performing school. It's got a reputation of being one of the best primary schools in Dubai, and it has for a number of years. And when I came out, my deliberate goal was to not change anything. So it's tempting as a new leader to go into a school and stamp your own authority or put your own spin on how things work. But I felt that would be arrogant or kind of unnecessary, because the school for many years had done a really good job without me. And so if I'm going to add value to the school, it has to be after knowing the school really well. So that first word, alignment, came out of a really deliberate goal to assimilate first before trying to influence the school to do any particular area of school life better. And then I thought, okay, it's also a useful way of thinking about the beginning of the year anyway, because at the beginning of any school year, whether you're a new leader or not, you might have new staff joining the school. You might have teachers who are moving year groups. You might have teachers teaching new children because you get a new class every year. And I think a mistake that I've made many times in the past is introducing new things on those inset days in September, when the cognitive load of teachers grappling with a new class, trying to set expectations and boundaries and routines and systems with them, and try and do new stuff as well, I think was too much. And so it's evolved into an approach where we say at the beginning of the year, we're not doing anything new. We're just going to set up your routines, your relationships, going to build kind of partnerships with parents, and quickly get up to the standard of teaching that we all have already agreed on. Let's get to a point where we're settled into the school, where children are settled, they know what's expected of them. And when we get to a stage where that's kind of settled in maybe the first 2 months or so, then we can start thinking about what we can do better. But first, it's can we just get back up and running with a new group of children, with a new team, with a new school sometimes, before we even think about trying to improve anything.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Just listening to you it's exactly what we expect of our children in a way. You know, we want them to be creative, we want them to be secure, we want them to be interested. But actually, if we expect all that with no knowledge of them, with no understanding of who they are, what they can do. So assessing those children, I mean, you as the head, as the leader, are having to assess your colleagues to ensure that they're empowered.
Yeah, and the idea that if a teacher is also changing their circumstance, let's say a teacher moves from year 6 to year 2, for example, they might have been an amazing year 6 teacher, but it's one thing to be an amazing year 6 teacher. It's quite something different to be an amazing year 2 teacher. And so the change in circumstances that we expect teachers and children to manage because of a new school year is actually probably a lot harder than we might think if we've taken it for granted over a little while. So that first bit of the year is so important in relationship building, setting out expectations, and getting your class or your classes into a position where trying something new as a teacher is actually possible and more likely to result in some sort of success.
Yes, and I think that whole process of planning and setting it down is obviously important, and having a framework from which you're working is vital. But it's also about collaboration and flexibility and agility.
Yes, definitely. And that beginning of the year has its own little rhythm, because in the first couple of weeks you've got the honeymoon period where everything's lovely, children are on their best behavior, they're still working you out as a teacher, you're working them out as a group of children to work with. And then you might have that same honeymoon period with the team you're working within, where people are still testing out kind of boundaries still. And so after those 2 or 3 weeks when the honeymoon period ends, then there's a difficult period itself of maybe having to reset, or maybe having to adapt any routines that may have worked in previous classes or previous schools, but they have to be a little bit different this time. So yeah, that adaptability and that agility is such an important part of that early stage of the school year, because we have to react to the children that are in front of us. Even though we've got strategies that we think have worked really well in the past, they probably need some sort of adaptation for the children in front of us.
Yeah, I had a friend who used to say, don't smile till October half term, which I used to think was a bit harsh if you're teaching reception, but there was an element of truth in that. So this is a big question. What makes good teaching then, Nick?
This is such an interesting question. And if you'd asked me maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I'd have given an answer that's probably a little bit different now. I think it's a really important question for us to be bothered by, because essentially knowing what that is, or having an idea what that is, and then spreading it around a school is at the heart of what school leadership is. And a bit more on the importance of having it. I think if you have a really good shared understanding of what great teaching is, you're far more likely to get good conversations about it, and therefore learning about it, and hopefully as a result children doing better. It's a question that has people and organizations far more organized and resourceful than I kind of deliberating over it. And I think I come back to one cop-out answer. I think great teaching is whatever results in children learning really well. And I found, and the reason I said if you'd asked me 4 or 5 years ago, the question would be different. I don't think I'd have said that 4 or 5 years ago. I'd have been a bit more dogmatic about what teachers should do, about maybe an approach to how you teach maths, or how you teach early writing, or how you teach early reading. Now, having experienced different schools, having experienced kind of international schooling now, is so much clearer to me that there are lots of different ways in which to get those great outcomes from children, based on some really kind of sound principles, but the practices are far more varied. And another difference, I think, between what I would have said a few years ago and now would be, a few years ago I'd have been far more specific about teaching strategies that are far more cognitive science focused. But now I would say what makes great teaching, first and foremost, there's an element of trust. So teachers have to have trust, the trust of the children that they're in front of them. And that what makes great teaching, I think, it's more problem solving. Teachers have to solve problems in the moment, different types of problems throughout the day. So one is about how they communicate the curriculum. One is about how they make what's invisible, what children are thinking, visible. How they elicit some participation, and how they do all of those things whilst accommodating their own needs. And I think that's probably how my thinking of that has evolved, that great teaching is anything that results in great learning. And we get to that point through helping teachers to understand the problems that are in front of them, and to do that in real time, and to select from lots of different strategies rather than blanket approach to a given strategy. So I would have said something like, in the past, great teaching is checking for understanding, or cold calling. But I wouldn't say that now. I'd say that great teaching is anything that gets all children answering questions, or great teaching is making sure that you build on what children already know, rather than those maybe specific named strategies of what I'd said a few years ago.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because that whole framework of pedagogy, whether it's the teacher or the learner, making sure that they all join up in a way which is comfortable, because yes, we've got targets to hit and we've got stakeholders who are expecting feedback, but we need to get the balance right, don't we? It needs to be natural.
Yeah, we do. And particularly for the youngest children, that piece on relationships is and trust and belonging and safety is such an important part of it, that none of those other fancy strategies will work as well without that fundamental part.
And I also think that it's really hard. Teachers who are experienced have so much to offer, but there's also a sense of needing that sort of refresh with new teachers coming in, newly qualified teachers coming in, and changing the dynamic and adding that sort of emphasis, really, that maybe is lagging from some more experienced teachers. And that's not a criticism. It's not a judgment call at all. You just need that balance, don't you, of different profiles and personalities.
Yeah, you do. You need kind of diversity of ideas and diversity of thought and diversity of approach, because it's very easy to create a school that is an echo chamber where everyone says the same thing. And if you do that, then the provision might not be as rich as if you've got people challenging and asking why and suggesting different things. That's such an important part of an evolving school, to have that and to encourage it, and to focus back on the problem that that teachers are trying to solve. One of the most dangerous things that can come out of people's mouths at school is, we're doing it this way because we've always done it that way. And even if you're settled on something you think works, there's always some sort of evolution, some sort of innovation, some sort of tweak that can be applied to a different class or a different group of children. And that's a really important mindset to adapt, or to encourage in school.
And in your school, is your team predominantly from the UK, or have you got a mixture? Or have you got international teachers? How does it work in terms of getting the balance right?
We're what's called a premium school, where the fees are a little higher than some others, and so because of that, all of our class teachers and our specialist teachers that teach national curriculum subjects are all British trained. Some other schools aren't necessarily like that, so schools with lower fees might attract some teachers to teach the national curriculum from other parts of the world. We of course have, well, I say of course, our Arabic and Islamic education teachers are predominantly from the Middle East, mainly Egypt, and so there is a really interesting balance of culture and expectation and difference in teacher training, which is so valuable for collaboration and for thinking differently about education from an international perspective, which is one of the reasons for choosing this adventure, is that kind of new thinking and new opportunities.
So your children, is there a mix of EAL, or is it predominantly English as a second language or additional language? We're
a British curriculum school where the main language of instruction is English, and so it's like any other school in England to a certain extent, particularly if you're from a diverse area where English is the predominant language, but there are maybe 80 plus different nationalities and another maybe 30 different languages that are either first or second in the homes. Dubai is a very multicultural society, so that's reflected in schools, definitely.
And so the curriculum is being defined by the national curriculum. So you're obviously addressing having a solid core of teacher specialisms in there. What about things like assessment and the way in which you, both from the teacher's point of view and the children's, you must have something that sort of sits and gives you the insight you need in order to develop and deliver?
Definitely. I mean, Dubai is and the UAE is probably the most regulated school system in the world. And what I mean by that is the equivalent of Ofsted, which is the KHDA, commit to annual inspections up until this year. Up until this year, there's been annual school inspections. So the regulation is very high, and the framework is very thorough that we're held to, and it's very much based on outcomes for students, and so they stipulate summative assessments at different points throughout the primary age range that are very much used from an inspection point of view. So children sit the new group reading test, the NGRT reading test, which is a standardized reading test, every term from year 2 upwards. There are progress tests that children sit at the end of every year in maths and English and science, as well as the Pearls and Tims assessments that come around every couple of years. That they also play a big part. And so assessment, particularly standardized assessment, is a huge part of life here, that we are held to account for administering, for analysing, and for adapting the curriculum and adapting the provision in light of those results. It's very different to the UK, that is moving away from that kind of thing, and more about curriculum intent and implementation. And it's the other way around here, where it's very much on test results, the importance of tests.
That's a huge challenge for you as a leader and for your leadership team to get that balance right. Yes, we've got to deliver, but actually in delivering, we've got to offer something that's going to enable that delivery to take place, and a curriculum that's balanced and exciting and innovative.
Definitely. I mean, there's what I think is the right way to go about it, which is a broad and balanced, exciting curriculum that's well sequenced, that's well thought out, but also a real attention to what children understand in the moment, and what their next steps are, and then what they're learning over time. It is a huge shift in thinking about making sure that no child slips through the net, and all the stuff that would have done in the UK of pupil progress meetings and analysing data and that kind of thing is done to an even higher standard, or an even more granular level, in order to help children to make the quickest and most long-lasting progress that is possible.
And from the period of time that you've been at the school, are there things that stand out for you that have changed and impacted in a way that perhaps you hadn't anticipated, or maybe you'd always planned and they have?
That's an interesting one. My approach to leadership, I think, in this school compared to previous schools, is the appreciation, or the acceptance, or even the encouragement of emergence. And so in previous schools, as the head, I would be quite, how should I put this? I'd be quite direct in terms of how I wanted the school to run. I'd be quite direct in how I want us to teach English, or how I want us to teach maths, or how I want us to approach behaviour or special educational needs. Whereas in a school that has a great history of really established systems, my approach, I think, has somewhat changed to be more appreciative of allowing my own understanding of what a great school looks like to develop more. So rather than imposing my vision or my own preferences on the school, I think this is this most recent leadership position is more about growing together, growing my understanding of what great schools look like, and influencing my school, but also kind of that coexistence and the co-development of what great schools are, because this is the first school where I've come in and thought I don't need to do a turnaround. So my previous schools, I've kind of had to kind of approach in that way because they've been kind of lower graded or that kind of thing. Whereas this is a completely different challenge and a completely different context, which is great for my own professional development because it requires me to do something different, which is to meet the school where they're at and look for ways to develop rather than start fresh with things that I think a school should do. It's a wonderful challenge.
It is a wonderful challenge, but actually so much easier to go somewhere where you can immediately have an impact. If it has been graded as needs to do better, however we want to phrase that, to go in and say, oh, well, let's, I can do that. And when you're coming into something that's established, to maintain the ethos, culture of the school, but also the personalities and the expectations, and still come in and feel as though you're making a difference.
It's a completely different one, but I think is and requires a completely different skill set as well. And one of the reasons for wanting that change was to try something new like this. And it does. I have to still force myself to think in different ways occasionally to appreciate that what I'm seeing might not be what I would previously have advocated, but to remind myself to look at the outcomes and to look at the results and to grow my own understanding of that there's more than one way of doing something really well.
You've been there now a few years. You're reflecting. You're obviously understanding what you need to do and what your team need to do, and you've obviously used a lot of experience from before. But the journey never ends, right? There's always some more to do. So thank you for sharing what you shared. I mean, I'm really glad that we've connected again. If there was one thing you'd like to identify as in the distance, doesn't matter how far in the distance, that you've still got to achieve or you'd still like to make sure you put a tick against, what would that be?
I think there are probably two things. One is legacy. Coming around more and more and more to the being the head of a school, the principal of a school, you become very attuned to a community and long term thinking. And I do want to make sure that I can make the school stronger than it was when I joined through succession planning or through stability or through growing the next group of leaders that might then end up leading the school in the future. So that idea of leaving something behind, I think, is really important. Not that I think I'm going anywhere anytime soon, but you need to think 15, 20 years down the line, because this is a school that will be here longer than all of us. And the idea that I can leave behind a model of education, a way of working that means that children that aren't even born yet, or teachers that aren't even teachers yet, continue to work in a way that benefits the community really well, I think is a really good motivating factor and something that I want to work towards. And the other is scale. I think most people at some point move into leadership because they want to influence more children. They want to provide a better education for more than a class of children, or more than a year group, or more than a phase. And so if at some point there's an opportunity to influence at even greater scale than the 1,300 children that are in my school, and the couple of thousand parents that are part of the community, and the extended families and the teachers and their families, if I can keep going with influencing people at scale to have a better education, then that's also something that I want to be able to tick off at some point in the future.
Well, thank you so much for your insight and also your very clear understanding of what needs to happen. And maybe some days it feels clearer than others, but as usual, today it's been really clear and concise, and we're very grateful to you for sharing that with us. So good luck.
I really enjoyed it.
Speak again soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret.
Wherever your place or space, I hope he gleaned something new or felt reassured by what you are doing wherever you are in the world. Nick's compassionate insight painted an accurate picture for me, ensuring that the environment, content and opportunities for maximising a school's potential are kept in check. No mean feat. It doesn't matter where we are in the world. Children want to learn and teachers want to teach. Having the right people doing the right things is absolutely key. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Renaissance Space podcast, please take a moment to rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget that you can catch up on all previous episodes at uk.renaissance.com/resources/podcasts. And if you'd like to get in touch, please do email us at podcast@renaissance.com. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the Renaissance Space podcast, please check out the Education Joining the Dots podcast from our colleagues at GL Assessment. Thank you.